Hello, I'm Joe Orlando, Executive Vice President at Heritage Sports. Today we are going to be talking about the called shot and the jersey that Babe Ruth was wearing during that historic moment. It's one of the most talked about, debated, and imitated moments in sports history. In 1932, the New York Yankees were taking on the Chicago Cubs in the World Series. Tensions were mounting even before the series started. Joe McCarthy, who was the manager of the New York Yankees at the time, was fired by the Chicago Cubs just a couple of years earlier. So there was a bit of a revenge factor for Joe during that series. In addition, former Yankees player Mark Koenig had been picked up by the Cubs about halfway through the season in 1932. However, the Cubs decided they were only going to pay Koenig half of his World Series bonus. This enraged his former teammates at the New York side. In fact, Babe Ruth called the Chicago Cubs cheap in public, and this created even more tension as the series progressed. By Game 3, the Yankees were up 2-0, and the game was tied 4-4 heading into the top of the 5th inning. Babe Ruth went to the plate, and the Chicago Cubs dugout and the fans were giving him an incredibly difficult time. So during the at-bat, as the strikes were going by, strike 1, strike 2, Babe Ruth was jawing with the Chicago Cubs dugout, back and forth, and you could see this in the video that exists of the at-bat. But he had one strike left. Right before that next pitch was thrown, you could see Babe Ruth make a gesture, not only to the Cubs dugout, but towards the mound and center field. Now this is where the debate comes in. Some people feel that Ruth called this shot, some people don't. But there is no debate about the surrounding circumstances and what happened next. On that very next pitch from Charlie Root, Babe Ruth hit the longest home run in the history of Wrigley Field up until that point. For anyone who has played any level of baseball, you know how difficult it is to hit, especially when you're in an emotional state. Well, during the at-bat, again, you can clearly see how emotional the moment was for Ruth and the Cubs dugout. Yet in that moment, Babe Ruth rose to the occasion and hit the ball out over the center field fence. That is part of what makes Babe Ruth an icon and special in sports history. From that point forward, when the media got a hold of this story, and then Hollywood years later, in movies like The Babe Ruth Story with William Bendix, and The Babe with John Goodman, and a host of other movies and television shows, that gesture became more and more pronounced and more Hollywood-like in time. What's most important about the called shot is not the gesture itself, it's the surrounding circumstances. It's the emotion of that moment and the at-bat and the tension that was building between two teams. Babe Ruth rose up in that moment and did exactly what we all expect Babe Ruth would have wanted to do, which is to hit the next ball over the center field fence. And that's exactly what the Babe did. Now let's talk about the jersey itself. One of the most remarkable aspects of this New York Yankees road uniform is that it has been photo matched. Photo matched to the day that Babe Ruth called his shot. For veteran collectors of baseball jerseys, they know that vintage uniforms are very different from the modern productions we see today. Back during this time, these jerseys were handmade. So every jersey is a little bit different. The alignment of the buttons in relation to the lettering on the chest are different from jersey to jersey, sometimes even within the same season. This jersey, because of the points of reference along the chest, including some discolorations on the jersey itself, on the face of the jersey, third-party photo matching services have been able to definitively match this to Game 3 of the World Series. Heritage Sports is known for bringing you some of the most spectacular and iconic sports collectibles in the hobby. Like the called shot itself, we expect the sale of this Babe Ruth jersey to be one of the most memorable in the sports collectibles industry.